Go. Hello, everybody. Hey, we're just waiting right now to get everybody locked in. I see that we're sending, and we are online. Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome back to the Conservation Conversation. I'm your host, Eric Crown, and it is Monday, quarantine day number whatever everybody's going through right now. And for people that are just tuning in for the first time, you can type your comments into Facebook or YouTube, and they will appear on the screen with us. And today we have an incredible guest. We have a good friend of mine, Scott Countryman, who is not only a very forward-thinking conservationist, but somebody who is currently living the quarantine out in a life that a lot of us dream we're in right now, which is to be on a remote, beautiful island. But there is a lot of realities to living on that island, and a lot of that requires a way of thinking to get back to nature. So I'm very excited for our guest today, Scott, and thank you everybody for coming in to join us. So we're going to go ahead and start off the show today. And as we always say, it's our world. Let's talk about it. All right, here we are. It's episode 24. Can you believe that? 24, we're already in. Hey, Colleen, thanks for joining today. Let's see, what we got going on here. We're having a little bit of, it turns out that the software I use was under a DDoS attack, so it's a little bit slower today. Colleen, thank you for joining us. And hey, Coralie, thanks for being here. And hey, Camilla from the UK, fantastic. It's so great to see everybody tuning in today. I hope everybody's healthy and your families are healthy and doing okay also. Let me know, how's everybody spending their time? How are you guys getting through all of this? If you're like me, you probably still have to work from home. So it's not too bad. But I do, again, hope everybody's doing okay. You know, there's a lot of craziness going on right now. And we're not going to harp too much on the corona virus or the flu or any of that stuff. There's so much negativity swirling around. What I would like to do today is focus on how this can be used as a positive way to read through and envision moving forward as a culture and as a people, because it's important. You know, the way we've been thinking for the last 100 years have brought us here, so it obviously does not work. So I always like to start off with quotes, and today's quote actually reminds me of our guest today, and you guys will understand that for sure when you get to meet him. Oh wait, let's see. Hope you're okay. Camilla, yes, doing great over here in Los Angeles. Just trying to maintain as much distance as possible, while still going into a virus blender with everybody in the store. So, you know, it's kind of like a 50-50 when you have to do that. Coralie, very envious. You're gardening. That's fantastic. And Colleen's working from home. Lots of walking the pups. Oh, that's great. I bet they love it. Yeah, hanging in over here. You know, Marty and I having a good time. We're watching some documentaries. We are out walking. We are working on some new projects and actually coming up with some new topics. And it's, in a way, it's been nice because things have slowed down a little bit, and I've been able to bring a few new things together, which I'll be able to share with everybody very soon. But today, why don't we start off with our favorite part of the show, my favorite part of the show, which are the quotes. Anyway, today's quote comes from Lao Tzu, who says, "Love the world as your own self. Then you can truly care for all things." Now, this is very important these days because how we treat the world is how the world is treating us. And this virus is, in essence, all of our neglect to the world around us, and, you know, has now come back upon us. As we talked about in previous episodes, over 60 to 75 estimated percent of all viruses do come from wild animals. And, you know, they just have a different type of biology going on that ours cannot handle. So we have to remember that the only way we're going to move forward healthily is to change the way that we're dealing with animal agriculture and a couple other things. Hey, Barbara, thanks for joining in today. And hey, Karen, hey, thanks for joining in from New Zealand. That's awesome. That is awesome. And New Zealand, I know you guys have a lot of good fresh air. How is everything going over there? I'd love to hear, you know, if you guys are doing a quarantine or, you know, how it's going. And also, so, you know, today, like I said, we're going to talk about basically how this problem that we have right now. All of us in our minds are thinking, I wish, and I caught myself doing this yesterday. I wish I lived on an abandoned island, and all I could do is just go dive and surf, and that would just be a perfect life. And again, our guest today, Scott Countryman, is doing that. Only he's living on a volcanic island that doesn't have a lot of growth and vegetation. So he's had to find ways to become very inventive. And it's actually, he's got an amazing story. I'll closer. Jim McHugh. Hey, Jim. Thanks for tuning in today. Working in inpatient drug rehab facility in Massachusetts. Definitely concerned about new clients. Well, Jim, stay safe out there, and thank you for being out on the front line. It's important that people that need help are still able to get help. And, it's incumbent on all of us that can help to do so and to stay out of possibility of getting sicker so that we don't distract from people like Jim that have to help clients that need the help right now. Things are critical and they're important, and they're focusing, laser focusing us in on what's important. Hey, Beth, thanks for joining today. It's good to see you. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with this, but in America, and if you're not from America, you might be surprised by this. And if you are from America, you've probably heard of this. Camilla says, everybody talking about returning to normal. I'm not really know what normal really is. It's a good point, Camilla. It's a fantastic time for us to redefine normal, because as it's been cannot be as it shall continue. It's impossible. And my guest today is going to talk about, not only do we need to make things sustainable, we need to go actually a step beyond that in our thinking. And that's why I'm a huge fan of our guest today. So today in America, as we know, everybody keeps watching the news and things get updated a lot. But did you guys know about the Waffle House Index? Now, I'm not making this up. This is an actual thing. And now this is something that the FEMA introduced. This is something that America uses to determine how bad a disaster is inside of America. So the Waffle House Currency Index is currently red. So what exactly does that mean? Well, what it means is, and I'll just bring this over here, the Waffle House Index. So just to give everybody a little bit of a background, the Georgia-based restaurant chain has more than 2,100 locations across 25 states. They are known to be open through anything. They're open 24 hours. If a Waffle House closes, it's a bad thing. So this term, the Waffle House Index, was coined by a former FEMA administrator in 2011. Now, where are we? As of March 26, 429 Waffle House locations were closed, and another 1,500 are only doing carryout orders. So this is actually the Waffle House Index. I just borrowed this graphic. And if it's green, that means that all the restaurants are open and they have a full menu. I'm not even making this up. If it's yellow, it's a limited menu, and if it's red, it's closed. And if it's closed, it means that in America, at least, it's a disaster. So we currently have Waffle House Index at red, which means that there is so much danger of contamination that we are now in red. So there we have it. I don't know if that's comforting or funny or maybe a mix of the two. The fact that our government sees how bad the disaster zone is based on the Waffle House Index. But we got to hope that things will be dealt with appropriately. I don't know. I had to share that with you guys. I was really surprised when I found out that that was an index actually used to determine how difficult things are. So let's see, who do we have here? We have Emma. Hey, Emma, thanks for joining in, also from the UK today. And hey, Heather. Heather's up in Washington and works on restoring a classic tugboat called the Dominion, which is an amazing boat I got to spend a little time on when I was up there. And yes, you know what? I thought it's even better. You know what? We're all at home. Let's spend our time talking about our world and the future around us, because this is how we can actually change things. Now, all of us are under lockdown. All of our governments have different ways of dealing with it, and it's going to be fascinating. We're going to talk to Scott, who's going to talk to us about, again, what it's like to be on this island and the good and the bad, because you have to be resourceful. Again, everybody sort of has this fantasy idea that you'll be on an island and it'll just be, some relaxing music playing and you're in a hammock and then your food's there. But in reality, one thing we brought up in the last show, and I want to bring this up again before we go talk to Scott, is what's really important to remember is right now in America, most people go to the grocery store and they can't get toilet paper and maybe not some other items. This is the closest Americans in multiple generations have come to food shortage and food insecurity. Now, food insecurity is a worldwide problem that affects a lot of people. And if you imagine that your grocery stores not only have limited, but are just closed, that's what it's like for most people that live out on islands and live in nature and live this kind of sort of getting back to nature life. So it's a lot of hard work, whether you're a farmer or you work on an island or you're out fishing for your family, whatever you're doing. The point is, it's a lot harder than you imagine. And again, the food insecurity is a very important perspective because we have to remember when we work in conservation, we have to offer solutions to people that are in difficult situations because otherwise they're just really going to be focused on eating, which is, what a lot of people have. So it's important that we keep that perspective in and we remember that, especially when we talk about people that are poaching or that are doing illegal fishing. We have to always weigh out what's happening. It's not a clear-cut good guy, bad guy situation, and a lot of conservationists won't say that, but in reality, we have to remember it's all about perspective. And again, we now have a slight perspective of what many people live as a day-to-day life of food insecurity. The fact that our food insecurity comes from getting to buy stuff puts us in a totally different world anyway. These people live off the land for the most part. Anyway, we're going to get more into that with Scott. Now, let's see. Camilla says insane. Yeah, Waffle House Index. I know, right? I figured people overseas might be like, what, really? And Corley, thank goodness. Yeah, you know what, Corley? That's great. And you know what, Corley? You've taken a huge step going back to nature by farming on your own. And when we talk to Scott today, we're going to talk about ways that you can at home get back to nature and have more sustainability like this. Hey, Kim, thanks for joining today. Good to see you on here. And Kim, I don't know if you're still in LA or not, but I hope you're doing well and I hope all your family's safe. And thanks for being on. And Camilla says, Mitch Allen. Yes. Back to nature. Let's connect our dots and let's forget about politics and let's thinking about, and as we always say, don't judge the environment through your political party, but judge your politicians through the lens of the environment and make sure that they are living up, to your expectations because we have to change them. Now, this brings us back to something very important before we start to move into the show. We need to talk about the fact that during this coronavirus, we have a massive issue where the EPA has retreated. They actually indefinitely suspended the enforcement of all environmental laws. So this is important because everybody now needs to be especially careful and thoughtful about their food resources and what's happening. So Corley says, yes, you always have all the fruit, all need fruit. See, that's fantastic. Fruits, veggies, and nuts. That's the essence of it all, which is great. And Corley, it's good to be able to have the ability to grow your own food like that. Now we're going to talk to Scott a little bit about how he finds food. Now we've been talking here today, but we're going to now get into. I just wanted to share Scott. The Philippines is a very big chain of islands in the South China Seas. And it is one of the most beautiful places. I got a beautiful opportunity to spend on.
Here we are in our very cool island pad in Dimipak, which is an island in northern part of Palawan in the Philippines. And this is our base camp for the next week or two. We're running missions out here. Well, in fact, it's not out there. It's over the other side of the island. Trying to right now.
And he's on this.
So little wildlife on this island. A few geckos.
Has had some imposed on me. So I'm going to show you a quick video that Scott shot and sent to all of us to let us know how difficult it is over there. Look at these incredible waves. We're going to talk to Scott about this. But imagine if you can dive and surf with one of my favorite surfing. One of the best places in the world. But in paradise, here's Scott.
Hi, it's Friday, March 27th, and it's the second week of the COVID-19 virus community quarantine. I'm here on Dimibak Island in Uswanga, Palawan, where I've been for
There we are. Hey, man.
about a month.
Oop.
And we're out of food, and they don't let me go to shore for food or anything because of this quarantine thing. So I've taken it upon myself to do some foraging and see what we can find. So I spent the day getting all my fishing gear ready and got on the kayak because we're out of gasoline and paddled out to sea. And I've learned you don't want to bring 3 rods. It's good to bring just 2. Because in the beginning, the planer, there was too much bait on the back of the small planer, and it was pulling it up and it was going on the surface, and it wasn't going down like it was supposed to. And I was catching some small fish, but I'm talking like 3-4 inches long, but not what I wanted. So we got a huge tangle at one point where I didn't realize that one of the lures was dangling off the back, and I went over a shallow spot. I got stuck on the rocks, and then a wave came, and didn't tip over, and I didn't lose any gear, but I actually did lose a couple fishing lures to the rocks, and made it back before dark. It's about 7:30 now. So this is my dinner. We have a camote dish. So we dug this up earlier, and I put it on the rocket stove all day, and it's just soft now, and I think it's maybe with a little bit of seasoning. I think that's going to be pretty good. This is mulungai, which is I forgot the name of it in moringa. Is it moringa leaf? And then this is my last cracker. So I got a cracker, and I got this whole thing of peanut butter, which is I'm going to live off that for probably the next 5 days if I don't catch any fish. But I think I got the problems figured out, what I did wrong, and I'm going to try again tomorrow. Hope everybody is doing well out there. I'll be providing these updates mainly for myself, just to kind of keep a video log of how things are going day by day, and then maybe 20 years from now I'll watch it and get some entertainment value. All right, everybody, take care. Peace.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so that was a video diary from Scott. When I heard him say, "This is my last cracker," it really brought back to the point that, again, we are all working with this processed foods, and Scott is dealing with nature. And oh, hey, Paul's on today. Hey, Paul Ferber, thanks for joining. Another amazing conservationist that knows about life on the island. And Paul, I would actually like to have you on to talk to me one day here. And hey, Carrie, thanks for joining. Now, we're having a slight issue getting Scott on. Scott, are you able to hear me? Okay, so we're going to try to bring him back on here in a second. As you know, distance, the internet there is, I would imagine a little spotty, but we're going to see if we can get him back on here. And what we're going to do is, let's see, anticipation. Scott, yes, okay. Well, we got Scott on the comments here, and this is a fantastic thing. For whatever reason, I'm trying to reconnect right now with Scott. So 1 second, everybody. This is, I would say it's not TV, but it is live. So now we're seeing it happen. Hey, Scott, can you hear me? Oh, okay. No. All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit before he comes back and joins us again. So now, again, I want to talk about the fact that this coronavirus is creating an issue where we have to rethink how the world around us in relation to get that. And this is very important, and this brings up a lot of the shortcomings in the current animal agriculture that we have. Let's see, Scott is calling me back. Hey, man, are you able to hear me? Let me try to see if we can go over to Scott's Skype. Yep, I can hear you. Hey, Dan Finder, thanks for being on today. Dan's a really good friend from yours. Hey, Scott, can you hear me? Oh, boy.
I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, here we go. And 1 second, everybody. This is Scott Countryman, who, let's see, 1 second here. Scott, okay. Thanks for being on with us today. Let me just go ahead and fix this for us. And so, Scott, first of all, just to kind of get everybody up to speed, why don't you tell us a little bit about the island life there and how it's changed recently? Like, what is the situation right now?
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you.
Am I coming through all right?
Yep,
audio?
You're good.
Okay, great.
Can everybody hear Scott?
Well, we've been here for about 6 years. Eventually, we started out just on the ground and had a little well. We get some water, and over the years, we've sort of upgraded. We have a tide pool about 300 meters away. I'll pan around here so you guys can kind of see what I'm looking at. Out about 300 meters out is a tank that we built, and at low tide we can pump the water from a tide pool, which a natural spring water ground, and we pump it to that little concrete tank, and then we have a pump that pumps it up the hill so we have water, but no gasoline, no pumps, so we have to walk out there for our water. Wow. For food, we had stocks here, but we kind of ran out of those. When I say we, it's just me. We ran out I ran out about 2 weeks ago. So I've been finding creative ways to find food and a little bit of fishing and foraging. I got about 80 projects going on here. We've solar projects and water treatment projects and gardening and biochar and nitrogen fixing projects and coral reef projects. And so there's no lack of activities with tons of stuff we can do here, but sometimes lack of materials, and we can't just go down to Lowe's or Staples and get whatever equipment you need. So we have to make do with what we have.
So on the island, even before we get into the inventive ways to live on the island, what people I want them to understand too is that this island is made, it seemed like volcanic type of rock. There's not a lot of, there's trees, but there wasn't a lot of gardening vegetation, so people don't have this idea of a super, agricultural island. Can you let us know a little bit, what it's like there food-wise, and also, normally how if you're able to leave the island, has that changed for you?
Yes, because quarantine, it's different than social distancing and self-isolation that you have in the United States. Community quarantine it really feels like something out of a virus outbreak movie. We're not allowed to move even between neighborhoods. There's military checkpoints on the ocean and on the roads, stopping anybody from moving around. So, first of all, there were no stores really around here at all. There's a way in the town of Coron. That's where we got most of our supplies, like sugar and coffee and things like that. And now, because of all travel restrictions and movement restrictions, store-bought food anymore.
So that's a massive thing. Most people are over here sort of worried about that. Now, because you've been on the island for a while, now that you're not able to obtain the store-bought food, what sort of approaches have you taken, or how do you find food out there?
So there's a couple plants that grow wild around here. One is malungai, a moringa leaf, and that's incredibly full of nutrients, and you can kind of mix that in with everything. Fishing that I stopped doing to that, but now out of necessity, catching fish. So I made my own little pole spear out at usually early morning and late afternoon, and try to catch my dinner. Another thing that we're doing is bartering. So people are really short on cash here right now, and one of the things that I make here that I think is that I can trade is ice. We do have electricity, and we use electricity to make ice, and then with the fishermen in town, when I say in town, it's I can barter some ice for a fish, and so that's one way that I'm getting food, is just bartering solar power made ice for fish for the day.
Wow, that's and that's fascinating to know, and it's great to know that they can still barter and people can still get along with what they're doing there, even in a crisis like this. And actually, if anything, you're probably better set up for a crisis like this because you're more self-sustainable. And I kind of wanted to talk about that island living because it's very enviable. When I was there, I know you guys had put up some solar panels and had a little bit of running water that we could use here and there, and but overall it was very much a back to nature movement. So what I wanted to talk about now is let's talk about what it's like living on the island, because you're not stuck on the island. You live there all the time, and tell us how that's brought you back to nature and some of the changes you've had to make and what it was like to live on there.
Okay. I would say that one of the becomes increasingly obvious. So the more you have adjusted yourself to this kind of lifestyle, is that you tend to simplify your life, and I think it's a good thing to be materialistic in the sense that instead of living in a disposable culture where if something breaks, you just go to Walmart and buy a new one. Here, to own really high quality items that maybe can last a lifetime or generations. The example I think I used before was an iron skillet. If you have an iron skillet, and you take care of it, you can, even if it's all run and you keep using it, you can pass it on to your kids, versus like a Teflon pan, which is not only poisoning you, but the handle's going to break off in a year and a half, and you're going to have to go down, get on Amazon.com and buy a new one. So island life has taught me that if it needs a lot of maintenance and a lot of filters and replacement parts or batteries, that little AA or AAA batteries, never mind, don't get it. And when you start buying products that are more durable and can be reused or repurposed, then your life becomes less complex, and with less complexity becomes some happiness, and you have more time to think about important things and do important things instead of being flustered about all these broken gadgets.
I like that. Oh, sorry, one sec. My producer is a security alert. It's okay, Marty. Here we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, and I think right now we're having sort of a movement where a lot of people wish they could just get their minds and their lives back to a much simpler perspective. And you're kind of forced to do that when you're out there. Now we talked a little bit about the solar. Can you talk to me about a little bit about like what's the process you guys have had to go through, or what's it been like to get the island kind of up and running?
Yeah, we started out with just maybe 400 watts of solar just to charge cell phones and run an LED light, and we upgraded to a 1800 watt system, which we're actually, and that's enough to run a refrigerator now.
Nice.
And power tools. So if I'm gonna give some tips to island living, cordless Makita drill can be used for a million things, and the amount of energy it takes to sharpen a spear by to drill a hole for a lock or something like that it just cuts time like exponentially how to get things done. So having just that little bit of electricity for lighting, for a laptop computer, for internet, for phone, has been dramatic in terms of quality of life here. Now, the next step is a 9,000 watt system with 6,000 pounds of batteries. And we carry 200-pound batteries on and off boats and brought them all the way down here and set them up. And what's missing is a tiny little remote control box to configure the inverter. And now with the quarantine, I can't get it. So it's sitting in Subic Bay, but there's no way to get it here. So I have 9,000 watts of solar panels, but I still rely on modern society to produce this electric remote control to configure the inverter. So once we have that, then we have abundant power for things like welding and running 24-hour pumps and fans, and having a separate freezer that we can make ice exclusive, and even a tickle of electricity to go to the coral reefs where we actually are growing coral using electricity. But until we have we really have to conserve and manage our the electricity that we have.
Now, you know what? You just brought up the corals, and what I'd like to do, actually, we just talk about those for a quick second and diverge. You know, one of the things that I think that I really enjoy about you is your philosophy that sustainability is not enough. Can you kind of tell us how your thoughts are on that, and also what you're doing with the coral reef, because this is an amazing way to try to, jumpstart everything.
Okay, I got this concept of sustainability of Tom Chi, who is with Google Labs before, Idea Lab, and a bunch of other think tanks. And basically, he made the argument that if you're taking out of the system as much as you're putting in, you're still going to be living on a dead planet, because even if you're 1% negative, because of shocks to the system, a storm, a coronavirus outbreak, whatever it is, if you're 1% negative that year, eventually you're going to be zero. And so when you look at sustainability, like, let's say, sustainable carbon emissions, meaning like you're putting in just as much carbon as you're taking out, again, that's not enough. So we need, in the climate change example, we need to be sequestering gigatons of carbon, not just trying to get to zero. And we need to be pulling down a lot of that carbon that's already rising up through the atmosphere. That same thing goes for living out here in nature. So there's 40 different ways that the environment is being degraded here by human presence. And one of the goals of our project here was to be to the ecosystem. So from our presence here, the environment actually becomes healthier. And again, to use some of Tom Chi's, he used the examples of ants, and that, there's roughly the same volume of ants on the planet as there are, in terms of weight, as there are human beings. But they consume, I think it was something like 30 times their weight every year, whereas humans are consuming like 2.5 times their weight. So you'd say, hey, well, it's the ants. They're eating, 15 times more than humans, and they're destroying the world. Well, it's actually just the opposite. The more ants there are, the healthier the ecosystems become. So it's not about how much we consume, it's how we consume. And so, again, being in an environment like this where we're doing nitrogen fixing, periodically cutting off the tops of the trees and during the rainy season to let that nitrogen into the soil, growing coral reefs using renewable energy through a process called electric mineral accretion, helping the local people manage their fisheries better so they're getting better catch. So basically, by our presence here, reef, the forest is getting healthier with biochar and nitrogen fixing, irrigation control, plastic from the ocean and the beaches, which is also probably helping the environment a little here. And then set these no-take marine sanctuaries that are breeding grounds for both fish and coral. Again, I'm confident that we are net positive to the ecosystem here. We're not just a setter by our presence. And I think over time, as soil quality improves, as the biomass improves within the marine protected area, we're going to be hugely positive to the environment from our activities and presence.
And now, Scott's company is, well, one of the things that he works on is Reef, and this is actually for the coral triangle. Scott does is, and you can go to this website ree.ph and check out. There is incredible programs that he has listed here, and they're working on a multitude of educational programs, new ways to help promote growth within the environment. And it's an incredible website. So I highly recommend everybody go check it out and see what he's doing, because we just talked briefly there about some of the projects. And if you want to know more about those projects, and again, we'll put the link up at the very end, but definitely check out ree.ph, Reef. Now, to come back to Scott here, it's fascinating, the island life, and I love that philosophy of it's sustainability is not enough. We got to find a way to move it forward a little bit. Now, when you're there, what I wanted to ask about is, when it comes to conservation, it's very difficult because it's a very sorted kind of philosophies and groups, and it's hard to find a lot of common ground sometimes in conservationists or even approaches to conservation. And what I wanted to ask you about is, with island living, how that sort of has changed your perspective in conservation, or how you see things now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think every person working in environmental conservation in a place like the Philippines, where people that you're asking to stop fishing, the people that you're asking to set aside areas for no-take zones, I think that every conservationist can't, live in a hotel and eat the buffet in the morning and then go to a community in the afternoon for a PowerPoint presentation where they probably haven't had even a meal a day. And it's really easy for us in our balcony seats to look down on third world countries and say, why are they eating everything? And when now the perspective that we've always had enough food in the past when we're here, and we've always planned accordingly, and we had access, and there was always a way off the island, and there was always a procedure to get to a hospital if you got sick. And now there's none of that. And so, or it's just a lot more difficult. So with us now, I've had to modify my policies on fishing, again, because out of necessity. And so now I'm living closer to the diet of the local people here, and it's not very exotic. It's yams, like a sweet potato that I dig out of the ground, like I shot in the video there. It's a fish, and sometimes it's a fish that's 4 inches long, and that's it. That's dinner. And it's a good perspective, because in the future, when the lights come back on and things go back to the new normal, there's a little bit more sympathy and empathy towards the struggles that the people have here, and how you can't just ask them to stop fishing. You have to provide viable alternatives for food security here. And we've got some going now. We've got some aquaculture project. It's the ponds are being built right now. We've got some aquaponics that we're going to be teaching local people. We've got some advice for egg laying and chicken raising. And I think all these things will increase food security here and reduce the pressure on the reefs for the fishing.
I think it's great. You bring up a great point, and it's always important to remind people that it's not, they always make it seem like on TV that it's this kind of good guy, bad guy thing. But generally what happens, and what I saw when I was traveling over there, when I was over with Paul, and also over in the Philippines, and spent some time out there, what I saw was that, you've basically got the food insecurity, and that will push people to do whatever they have to do to survive. And in order to actually solve the problem, we need to give them solutions. We can't just tell them to stop and somehow they're magically going to feed their villages and their families. We need to find ways to offer solutions. And that's what I like, is that you guys are really thinking forward and you think in solutions.
Absolutely. And, I look at how panicked people get in the United States when they can't get toilet paper, they can't get access to fast food or something like that. And, I think that the people here are so much more resilient in that sense. Like when we have these shocks in the environment, they're pretty independent here. So they can continue on without a lot of anxiety about where they're going to get their food from. I mean, they have the same amount of anxiety 3 months ago as they do today about, being able to catch fish, or maybe a little bit more now because of access to fuel for their boat. Which is another point that I'm going to digress a little bit on, is that, they had it so figured out with subsistence hook and line fishing and farming, that they really, the world could kind of be falling apart outside of their little world, and it wouldn't really make any difference in changing their life. But over time, they've become increasingly addicted to fossil fuel, not only for their little generators, for their karaoke machine and charging a cell phone, but also for the main source of fuel to get to and from the fishing grounds. So over the last 20 years, the inshore fishery has been so depleted from overfishing and unsustainable fishing tactics that now they've got to go, 5, 10, 20 miles offshore to get to the pelagic fish.
Wow. So now they've got, so that's incredible. So the fisheries have basically just been depleted there, and now, I mean, without fuel, they're not even able to go to decent fishing grounds. Is fuel still abundant out there, or has it become more difficult?
Oh, I've got about 8 liters of gasoline left, and I'm watching every tablespoon, and that's just to run the generator on emergency backup stuff and pump a little water now and then. So, yeah, it's a huge problem. And, the fact that nobody has any money now, because there's no ATMs here, has a job anymore, so nobody's getting a salary from their employer, and nobody has savings here anyways. So they're a cash-based economy that whatever cash you make that week is the food you buy that week, money saved up, or any pantry full of dry goods that you can live off for weeks. So that liquidity problem is a problem if the only way you can get food is to go to a store. Where here, the only way to get food is to go out into nature and, what am I trying to think? Yeah. Extract that from the environment around you.
And, that's a very fascinating point, because the more you live to nature, the less these man-made sort of issues kind of affect you, and you're automatically sustainable.
Absolutely.
So, now I'm curious for the island. I wanted everybody to also understand, now you've been there for quite a few years. The island is sort of the home base for your conservation projects. But does it also work as like an ecotourism project, or is there ecotourism in the area?
Well, yeah, the frustrating thing for the last 11 years trying to run this NGO is that we're always standing in line for grants and funding from whatever source that we can find. And the Philippines is incredibly difficult to get funding for because of the bureaucracy and all the paperwork required to do anything here, and the corruption at the federal level. So, after writing a dozen proposals a year and maybe having one small one, with a couple $1,000s here and a couple $1,000 there, I got tired of using my own money and decided, okay, well, that's it. We've got to form a for benefits organization where we use the free cash flow to fund the conservation activity. And our current strategy is ecotourism. So the idea is that people get to participate in the revitalization of this ecosystem and have a great vacation at the same time. But now with the coronavirus, we've canceled all of our paid volunteers, and there's no travel to and from the island, and there's no money for salaries. There's no money for any of the materials now and in the future. And so that creates a bit of a crisis situation for our conservation organization, as well as any conservation around the world that depends on ecotourism for funding their conservation activity.
You know, and it's really important. Scott, you know, the reason I met Scott was we actually went over for an Earth Day presentation, and Scott brought together forward-thinking people from architects to frontline conservationists to you know, all these different approaches to how we can change the future today. You know, and on the show we always talk about revolution through routine. You know, what you do today on a day-to-day basis and how you live affects and changes the future. You know, in a sense, we're like eco Roombas, and it really is our job to try to leave it better than we found it. So you know, your efforts have been, I've always been super impressed, and you know, that's how, again, we first met, you know, doing the Earth Day Summit, and you know, you had brought together so many people, you know, to do that. So I really hope that, you know, it'll open back up again soon. I see some of the people here are asking for Scott's page and donation page. So, and I will make sure to put a link down there so that if you want to go check out what Scott's working on, you can also get in touch with him. You know, any support that, you know, that you can offer Scott as well, I'm sure would be very well appreciated. And, you know, one of the most important things that Scott does over there is education, because, and I think we could call it re-education, because the way that people are educated, it's difficult. And the people that need the re-education are not the people that are out there always on the day-to-day, but those of us that are, you know, behind the scenes here and running things. And we need to think very differently. So I think it's really important that you've been able to bring their perspective into a more mainstream approach so people can understand, you know, this way. And listen, everybody, I'm also going to put the link on there, because if you ever want to go to a beautiful remote place, this is the island. And once everything settles down, you're going to want to book a vacation over there. I'm ready to move there. You've got me for free, Scott. You know, so now this, okay, so real fast, I just got to say hi to Sally. That's my mom. Hey, Mom, thanks for joining. And yeah, she's on, so she's probably worried I'm going to get on a plane right now and go to the island. And Camilla says, it's shameful here in the UK watching people fight over a loaf of bread. And, you know, Camilla, that's a good point, because, again, this type of situation brings into the fact, again, if everybody can imagine that your grocery stores were closed, this is the true food insecurity that the majority of the people around the world live day to day. And that's what people out in these islands are living, and that's what is happening right now for them. So again, we have to find better ways of helping people have resources and have solutions and have food, access to food. It's the number one priority, and that's something Scott taught me. I said, especially, you know, and Scott, especially, I learned this from you. The food insecurity out in the more in the country areas drives people over time into cities, which turns into overpopulated cities. Good example where now their hospitals are overblown and they don't even have room for people. You know, so it all starts with food security. And whether that is for homeless people in America, it's for people living off the land in all around the world, or it's you know, any other right now where people have insecurity. So it's a nice moment where we can have an international cultural perspective together and understand food security, and always remember that other people don't have that. Now, okay, we talked about that. And now Sarah asks, Scott, are you vegan?
No, I'm not vegan. And in fact, I think I'm a flexitarian, a plant-based diet. You know, it's a lot of the people here, they eat whatever wild bird they can shoot. You know, they eat the giant monitor lizards. They eat all sorts of stuff. And I don't touch any of that kind of stuff, because I think that wildlife is under a lot of stress already. But there are. I love, if I had the link, I'd share it. But when you look at like your greenhouse gas footprint, lifestyle of wild caught fish and foraging and rotational gardening is actually the lowest, the most ecologically friendly diet and lifestyle that you can do, even more than being a vegetarian or vegan. So when you're out here and the soil is not rich at all here, I mean, it's rocky and salty and nothing grows here. So we basically have to create our own soil, and we compost our own manure. We're making liquid gold, urine, and biochar. And so anything that has any kind of nutrient value, we're recycling in thick black soil. But when you grow your own food and when you grow a carrot, it's like every piece of that carrot, you're like, oh, I'm savoring this fruit and it tastes more delicious and it has no chemicals on it and whatever. But you didn't buy like a dozen carrots, in the price Costco like bin, and if five go bad, you're like, no big deal. You throw away 30-40%, eat it, or it was in the bottom of your drawer and you forgot about it. When you grow your own food and and you're eating your own food, you become incredibly aware of every plant, and nothing goes to waste.
And that's a mentality that's very much missing from most of our, as people would call them, Western societies or whatever. We're very throwaway. And I like that because it comes back to what you were saying, that we need to buy things that last. We don't need to continue to just buy cheap things that will continue to destroy the world that we live in. And now, talking about food actually brings us to Coralie's question. How do you preserve your food?
Coral reef and preserve our food. Well, we have a refrigerator, and we tend to eat, like if we have a fish, it doesn't sit around very long. We eat it, and with the refrigerator, we can cook stuff and then let it sit for a while, in the refrigerator before it goes bad. But nothing goes bad because it doesn't. There's not a lot of food laying around.
That's one thing I learned over there too. A lot of the markets that are the open air markets.
I keep saying we. It's me.
It's just you on the island, right?
Yeah. Well, no, not. There's other people on the island, but it's about a walk, and it's they're really indigenous peoples there that are pure fishermen, and there's a thing like this quarantine thing. You're not even allowed to really go walk over to interact with your neighbors. So everybody's keeping their distance right now.
Well, yeah, and that's definitely, that is one thing when you live closer to the land, or like we would have to go to the markets every day to buy something. The markets themselves contain the amount that they know that the community can use. So there's not a lot of food waste over there. I was very impressed. From the sellers to the buyers, people are very focused on what needs to happen. Whereas here it's like, here's a bunch of everything and good luck to you. And, that actually brings me to Sarah's comment. Pandemics are from eating animals. Pardon me. Sarah, that's a very interesting point you bring up. Pandemics do start, over 60% of them do start from wild animals that intermix with domesticated animals that people end up eating. And that is a major issue. But it's not actually directly from eating the meat. Now, the one thing that I wanted to bring up, I'm vegan. So a lot of vegans don't like when I say this, but, when I was over there, if people didn't have fish that night, they weren't going to eat. So again, there's not agricultural solutions everywhere. And if you're lucky enough to be a vegan because you choose to not buy meat at the store, I think you're doing an amazingly wonderful thing. Now what we need to do as vegans, because we want to think forward and we want to help everybody, and we come from a place of kindness, is we have to find a way that local communities can still be sustainable without needing it. And I don't think that really we can compare animal agriculture to what is happening on these small islands or these small villages. Yeah, Scott, do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, if I could comment there. Yeah, I mean, it's like you look at factory farming and agriculture, and you can look to, waste products that are being produced by these massive piggeries and whatever, and I can see people's arguments about how animal agriculture is actually affecting us from a health perspective, but also from a climate change perspective. And eating meat out here, where you've got a pig in the back, and that some of your food scraps, instead of going into a landfill somewhere, are going into the pig bin, or your chickens are scratching through your compost pile, and that's where they're getting all their nutrients by eating all the little maggots and grubs and things like that that are growing in there. Eating that kind of meat versus some processed meat in a plastic packaging that's inside a plastic packaging that's inside a plastic packaging, loading with chemicals and hormones and preservatives. I think there's different kinds of meat consumption, and taking the element of cruelty out of the equation here. But I think that reducing our meat intake. I'm talking about modern American society would be a really good thing for the planet. But I'm also not completely opposed to eating meat sometimes, especially if you know where the fish do, which is almost impossible to find these days unless you caught it yourself. Or eating meat as sort of a small side dish instead of a gigantic T-bone steak, and that's all you do is eat this massive slab of flesh. I think there's some sanity in how you can consume and have
and that's
more
a good
balanced
point,
diet.
because I know when I was out there, the guys, it was mostly what was on the menu was rice, which was available, and fish. And I personally don't eat fish, so I remember I think for a few days I just had some rice. But that's how it is. When you're in that kind of situation, you got to make those choices. But
and there's no dairy here. There's no dairy here either. I mean, people complain about the dairy industry and milk and cheese and all that other stuff. There's no dairy here. There's no milk and there's no cheese. So I mean, we don't have to worry about limiting our dairy consumption.
It's just too hot in general, I think, over there all the time to, I always remember just,
Just nobody makes it, and nobody.
And that's so. Most of the farmers there, are they mostly growing just like agricultural export, or do they what's the main kind of farming over there?
So in this area, farmers, one would be a guy that just usually the housewife that has a small garden in the backyard, and maybe that supplies 20% of their vegetables that they consume, and the rest is bought at the local market. And then the next level farmer would be somebody who's, producing and not only enough for their own consumption, but for sale. And, most of the people I know that are farming have like 1 or 2 hectares, grow maybe 80% of the rice that they need for their own family. And there's 2 growing seasons per year, and then they tend to process to make and dry and store your culture here, and it gives them again a little bit of food security, in that they've got 500 kilos of rice all dried and stored in the back of their house, and regardless of what happens, they can have their rice with bayan, which is the Tagalog word for like something that goes with rice. So rice, and then you sprinkle a little shell juice on it, or a little bit of vegetables, or a little bit of fried fish. You'll just sprinkle it on the top, and that's basically 80-90% of the diet here.
Wow, that it's incredible to and it's incredible because the people there have to live off the land. So the decisions they've made and their diets have changed over over the course of time based on what was available. So it's it's interesting to see, and hopefully with the work that you're doing down there as well, and re-education with everything going on, maybe their fisheries will be able to come back. That's one thing, is with the coronavirus at the moment, everyone being on lockdown, it's kind of an interesting thing where nature is sort of, nature doesn't always need us to heal. Sometimes they need us not around to heal. So maybe there's a chance that these fisheries might bounce back, or are the bad guys not paying attention to the...
Well, if I could comment then, I think there's a couple points. One is that restrictions tend to be relaxed during times of food crisis and emergencies like this. So, I think you may want to talk about the EPA and what's happening with their environmental regulations there in the U.S., or maybe you already did. But, here there was already almost no enforcement against illegal fishing, and now it's a free for all. So, I still see the big commercial boats that are somehow getting fuel in Manila, and that they're setting their nets here illegally and doing all sorts of illegal fishing. And now the resources that maybe limit their illegal activity, now they're preoccupied on the virus, and everybody is just sort of turning their backs on environmental enforcement and overfishing enforcement. In some ways, it's worse for the environment because the small controls that were there to limit illegal fishing are gone, and the attitude is more sympathetic towards people who are doing illegal fishing because it's an emergency and they're just trying to feed themselves, which was the situation 3 months ago. It wasn't any different now. But, again, I don't want to digress, but after Typhoon Yolanda came through with a huge typhoon, the chainsaw ban was lifted, and they said, okay, yeah, there's trees that are falling down on your property, so you're related. So 80% of the trees went down because of the typhoon, and then a remaining 10% were cut down for profit because now everybody had chainsaws and no regulations, and they were just cutting down trees that were perfectly healthy that survived the typhoon right and left. So I fear for the same kind of thing happening here, where now we're relaxed. Everybody's going to be pushing the limits of what the law says.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is all the press that we've been seeing is like, hey, nature's getting a chance to take a break. But you bring up a great point. They're removing the protections that were there, and especially like for my friends that do eat meat in America, remember that the USDA has been now defunded, and they've basically stopped their inspections, and they had already cut those back 80% from what they were doing before. And also remember that there's no country of origin labeling laws in America. So if you do eat meat, it could actually be coming from anywhere around the world. As long as it's processed in America, it can be called a product of the USA. So remember, it's all very tricky to my friends out there that still do that. And, I think what Scott brings up is a very important point, that at the moment, just like the EPA has removed all regulations, it's kind of, they're saying to businesses and individuals, we know times are tough for you. We're going to kind of look the other way right now. And it's working a little bit for some of the individuals, but it has the possibility of becoming an environmental disaster. And it is something that we need to keep our eyes on and really make sure that they don't slip a bunch of stuff around while we're not paying any attention. So I think that's really a great point that you bring up, and it's something everybody has to remember. Nature still needs us, and we still need to be out there. And I know, Scott, that you always keep your finger on the pulse of how nature is working over there and how the reefs are working, and with your efforts to regrow them, and as well, what's happening out there. I remember being out there, and there was one point where I found a local fisherman who was doing some dynamite fishing. And, and again, we got to come back to the fact that, and again, I see there's an interesting, healthy debate going on right here on our podcast about eating meat. But again, I want to bring up, these guys are not out there possibly blowing themselves up, killing themselves, destroying their local fishing grounds because they're going to make money or they think it's a good idea. It's generally acts of desperation, and they need to eat. So again, we have to find bigger solutions to enable to really stop this kind of from happening, I think, in the future. Now, Scott, to just kind of do something kind of fun for a minute, actually, because it's been a really interesting but kind of heavy conversation. You know, everyone always, you see the memes running around Facebook, always say, what are the 5 things you would take on an island with you? And everybody always has answers to that. Well, you're a guy that actually has perspective on that. So I wanted to know from you, what do you think are the most important things to have on an island when you're living there?
Okay. Well, I mentioned power tools. You know, having that cordless drill, that's definitely a luxury. I would sunscreen. If you're going to be spending any time in the sun, people take the sun too lightly. But if you especially if your skin being out in the sun can be a death sentence if you don't have good cover. You know, I use this stuff called lid Band-Aid. So every time I get a little nick or scratch, I put this like super glue stuff over my cuts, and that keeps them from getting infected, because in this tropical environment, you know, small cuts can quickly turn into festering sores, and so you've got to constantly be, you know, on top of that, because again, without a hospital, you got to stop the soft tissue infections. You know, being connected to the internet has been amazing, because like why don't I talk and walk around as I go here. I don't think we'll lose the internet connection, but it kind of gives you an idea of the projects that have become possible because of an internet connection. One is this 5,000 watt generator. A rat crawled inside of it and chewed up all the wires. So what I've had to do is go on the internet and figure out how to rewire a Yamaha inverter type generator, and also fix the carburetor, which I've never done before, but with YouTube and figure out how to do that. This project over here is it's some flexible solar panels that I'm using to drive fans for a compost toilet. And it's great to be able to go on YouTube and watch 20 do-it-yourselfers and preppers and these people and how they do their stuff. And you know, you can see that there's a lot of termites eating this deck. So I went online and found out a ton of ways to treat wood without using chemicals, and that's been pretty helpful. There's always little do-it-yourself projects here. It was an old solar panel that didn't work. We turned it into a table. You know, how to make a handle for a broken knife. That was my job the other day. I had 3 broken knives and made 3 new handles. So again, it's about recycling. We're using, this is a pole spear that I made the other day out of some curtain rods, and I did have some surgical tubing for my fishing gear. If you want to take a look at this is our biochar project over here. So we're talking about, you know, what are things that you want to have on the island, and one of the things you want to have is an internet connection, because not only can you do cool podcasts like this, you can this, you know, like this rock wall here. I didn't know how to build a rock wall. I watched a video, and this guy was showing how to build rock walls, and we have plenty of rocks out there, and so boom, rock wall.
Nice.
And then we ran out of materials for metal scaffolding for the mounting the solar panels. So, you know, I went and got 100-foot long pieces of bamboo and learned how to treat them on the internet, and made a structure in the back there. So internet is invaluable, not only when you're alone like this, and the solitude can be a killer as well. So now being able to communicate with family, you know, teach myself how to do things by just logging on YouTube videos and, you know, asking experts. It's amazing. You find somebody who's really good at, you know, rewinding a generator, and they're usually happy to share their information for free.
That's great. You know, it's so interesting. Well, everybody has.
So bring an internet connection. Have an internet connection. Have to recharge your gadgets with small solar.
Oh, we lost you there for a second, Scott. Can you hear me? Oh, there you go. Sorry, yeah, we lost you for a quick second there. So, yeah. So, okay. So the most important things are internet and solar panels. I mean, you know, solar, I guess, must be such an important aspect. You know, over here in the country, people don't really have a lot of access to it, or it's still kind of like a theoretical thing in a way? Is there anything you wanted to kind of let us know about solar panels and how that was working? Do you think it's something that could sustain us in the future fully?
Absolutely. In fact, having where you have wind and solar, and maybe even a small generator for emergencies, but where you're really only using just 1 or 5% of your energy per year fossil fuel source, and then that's sort of a transition to 100% renewable. Not renewable, but if you need 100% uptime on your power, that ups the cost for batteries and things like that to a level that most people don't want to spend. I think the exciting thing about renewables is the battery technology innovations that are going on right now that are being driven by electric vehicles. So the cost and efficiency of batteries is at the point now with lithium iron phosphate, lithium batteries, some of the lithium or the metal air batteries that are coming out, where not only can we use them for homes, we can also use them for transportation. And right now, people, it's life-threatening that the supply chain for fossil fuel is collapsing. And even though the price is less than $20 a barrel somewhere in Saudi Arabia, the fact is that the gasoline isn't getting here anymore. And so if you had your own solar electric boat, and you could have that little 8-kilogram, lithium battery that you could pull out of your boat and put into your house for lights and watching TV and stuff, and then just pop it back in your boat and go fishing again, you wouldn't need to rely on the system. You wouldn't need to rely on the fossil fuel retailer in town for your own survival. And I think that's one of the goals of our program here, is to really push solar plus battery technology and having the peace of mind of knowing that you're not dependent on the infrastructure, but also to use it for transportation. And there's a revolution that's occurring right now with electric vehicles and marine propulsion that's going to happen, or that needs to happen, given that something like 40% of greenhouse gases in the next 20 years is going to come from transportation sector if we don't change something. And I think it was like 14 or 17% comes from marine.
Wow.
Without changing the amount of greenhouse gases that we're putting up in the environment from marine transportation, that is a huge chunk of what we need to change, and we need to wean ourselves out of fossil fuels, and we should start with communities like this.
That is beautifully said. Excellent perspective, and a very, very important point. That one way we need to change is to leave these old habits from behind. Now I see that Dave is the captain of the Dominion tug, which is a 1940s tugboat up in Washington State that's been that they're constantly putting back together. And he said that they're actually going to go off the grid and be able to use solar power. And it's pretty cool. They've actually gone back to renovate, and clean the ship out. So
awesome.
Yeah, so it's really cool to see everybody joining this sort of momentum, and I think it's incredible that you've done it there on the island, a place where people, wouldn't really be able to expect, everybody thinks, oh, just put some solar panels on my house and everything's fine. But I think it's very forward thinking to have that kind of self-sustainable island, and I love that idea of the boat. Solar powered boats would be incredible. That's always the one thing that amazes me, is when we're out on conservation projects and everything's so beautiful and quiet, and then it's like, and you get the smell of gasoline, and you think, nah. So now, see if anybody has any questions. Scott, I just wanted to, I know we...
One thing is, if I could add,
yes, please,
is that we have 3 solar boats. We have a 20-meter long solar-powered catamaran.
Oh, wait. Sorry, you got cut off. This is very exciting.
So sorry, I'm saying we have this 20-meter long solar-powered boat, and we have small other electric boats, but all of them are in near Manila. They're not here. So we have solar boats, and they're awesome, and they're getting better all the time. When I say we, I mean our organization has built our own solar boats going back 5 years. I'm not here. So right now that I kind of prove my point how useful and how smart it is to have a solar boat. But if it's only as good as the location that it's in, so if it's not here, we're stuck with using fossil fuel.
That's interesting. That's a good point. Wow, that's super cool about the solar boats. That is, I feel like that's a massively important thing that I don't see spoken about very often. And Coralie says, remember to watch for Scott's donate page. So, Scott, what I want to do is actually, there's so much more to talk about. I would actually hope that maybe we can get you back on the show, because I think there's so many more aspects. But for today, what I'd like to do is, I kind of want to, he's interested in getting back to nature. You're somebody that's living it. You've already given us a bunch of really good advice so far on how to do that, from finding ways to grow your own food, composting, a lot of different aspects that are self-sustainable, simplifying your needs, and of course the non-electric drill, the drill you could take with you. But what I wanted to ask about is, how, for one, a lot of people are watching, and I'm seeing a lot of comments. People want to be able to link in with you and pay attention to what you're up to, and also help with your projects you're doing. So one thing I'd like to do is, how can people get involved with what you're doing? And the second thing is, anything that you would like to offer to people as a way that they can take that first step back to nature.
Okay, there's a horrible 20-second delay here in our communication, but hopefully it'll be okay. So I would say, if anybody is interested in either generously donating or helping out remotely, we volunteer labor all the time from people that are website developers and actually not all the time, because that's exactly what we need right now. We need people to help generate content on social media. We need our website. I haven't touched the website in 4 years. So I mean, so outdated, and we have a ton of content, but right now I'm just kind of trying to get food and just try to worry about or the skills, honestly, to make really quality content. So if anybody has donate financially or has some skills that they think could be of use remotely, I would say just email me directly. I don't expect to get 1,000. I think if a dozen people email me from this over the next month, I'd be happy to individually speak to each person, whether it be a video conferencing or email correspondence, and find out how they can best help. The other thing, if you do email me, scott@ree.ph, or my name, scottcountryman@yahoo.com, you can be on videos that we do every week. So I have a couple friends that are interested in knowing how I'm surviving, and so I make a little video, like a 15-minute video every week of new projects and fish caught and new methods tried. I think it's got some entertainment value, and I'm happy to put a name on that distribution list. And so it's a BCC list, and nobody will see your email. And then you can click on the link and see what's happening with life here on the island. And makes me feel a little bit less lonely if I can interact with people.
That's great. Yeah, I'll put those links on so everybody can get a hold of that. And I'm sure everybody's going to be fascinated to watch and see how you're doing over there. And, it's the perfect time for this, because it's the one moment we're all kind of isolated. So it's perfect, because online we're all together. Here we go. So, Scott, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on today, talking to us about all these incredible projects you have going on, how you've managed to get back to nature, and how you're surviving over there in the island. Like I said, I would love to have you on again, because I think there's a lot more kind of eco questions I would like to talk to you more about and pick your brain about. Because, as I've said to everybody, what is impressive is Scott always is thinking forward about how do we change our approach, how do we change the way we're thinking, and he tries to facilitate bringing people together in order to make changes for the future, permanent changes, which we really need. And your effort is very inspirational, and I just wanted to thank you for everything you're doing out there.
Thank you, Eric, and it's an honor to speak to your audience, and I know you're doing great stuff as well, and I need keep up the great work on your. Let's do this again and talk about some other subjects if interest and explore some new things that we didn't cover today. Thank you again.
Yeah, man, I would love that. Sounds good. All right, well, I'll hit you up and we'll set it up for maybe next week or the week after. I know electricity and everything over there. Time is valuable. As is, how you spend each minute of your day. So I really appreciate you taking your time out today with us. And thanks for being on, man.
No problem.
All right, everybody. All right, man.
Be well. Take care.
And there we go, friend. Again, to me, a good friend and a very inspirational guy, Scott Countryman. I'm going to put the links up so you can go check out his work. I got to spend some time with him in the Manila, working on the Earth Day project, and the guy just really, he's amazing. There's just some of those people that have ways of bringing everybody together and getting them to work together for one common cause, and Scott has that special talent. So it was a real honor to have him on today. I'm very excited. And let's see. And I didn't get to say hi to everybody that joined us here. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Vicky. Thanks for being on. And I see Ina. Hey there. Thanks for joining today. And I know that you do a lot of research on what's healthy and what's not. And again, this brings us back to the point that what Scott is doing is what all of us want to do, which is go back to nature. Now, we have gone on such a far path away from nature that it almost seems foreign to us, something that is natural to us. It's where we're from. What Scott's doing or what people did thousands of years ago on these islands. And he is using the materials around him to make things work the way they can work. And that's what the history has always been over there. So, and again, we have to talk about, we have to remember that when we talk about going back to nature, there are aspects of it that are very difficult. In West, and they had a very hard life and very difficult life, and they worked really hard. So, the people that are out there that are growing the food, the people that are all on the front lines, making sure everyone is eating, are heroes just as much as everyone else out there. And I think that what's important is that if anything, we can find ways to localize our eating. It's something Scott sort of hit upon. And Coralie was talking about it. You can grow your own food, parts of it at least, and then you become slightly more self-sustainable, which is very important. So I think that, it's a really important aspect. Simplify. Go back to nature, simplify. It's something we all want to do. Right now is the perfect opportunity to do it. The world had got lazy and somebody hit the pause button. So here we are, and we have this wonderful opportunity to look around and say, okay, how do we do this better? Because, right now, one thing we are seeing is that there's no cure for this except for people to stay at home, and we can't live our lives like that. So we need to find better ways to stop these things from coming out. One excellent way to do that is to change animal agriculture. I personally think we should stop this huge animal agriculture that we have in our country. Local farmers, grow your vegetables if you can. And, all of us have this ability. I mean, we can even grow stuff indoors. And there's something good for that. So, bye, Mom. My mom's saying goodbye to everybody. And Coralie says bye. And Coralie says grow and preserve. And I think that is exactly what we're talking about. Scott is very lucky that he has that refrigerator. Well, has it. He put a lot of time into building solar power that has electricity. And I remember when I was on the island, and there's some new stuff on the island I didn't see there before. We did have electricity, but like when you go to the bathroom, It's, it's more natural. there's no bathroom and there's no toilet paper, so there's no rush for that either. Actually, most of where I traveled, they didn't even use toilet paper, so it's kind of it's more of an in-demand thing, I think, over here. But grow and preserve. Think about limiting your footprint. It was different when we talked about our carbon footprints and everybody was traveling everywhere and doing everything. But now that we're stuck at home, we have the ability to eat. We have the ability to grow our own stuff. We have our ability to stop being so in need of consuming. Now we're paying attention to what's important. Are the elderly eating? Are people getting health care? These are the things that I see mostly coming around. And, oh, wait, one sec. Here we go. Let's see, one sec. Scott just called back, so I don't know if he had an update or not. We're going to see here in a second. Nope. No, I think it was maybe a pocket call. He's probably putting up some more solar panels or something. Incredible work. So, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, here he is, and, oh, hey, there you are. Scott's back. I do. With the Oh no, you're coming in pretty good. Actually, no, it looks a lot better. I'll be able to get you a link to it. You're actually on right now again. Yeah, surprise. But no, everything looked great, and really, the fact that you've got internet out there, I know we made the welcome back, surprise cameo. But it is funny. It is like good internet, difficulty getting water and food. It's a sign of modern times. So, Scott, let's see. Grow herbs for oils, Corley. See, exactly. Everything's good though, man. Yeah, no, we'll definitely have you back on. I'd like to talk to you more about other sustainability projects. So, exactly. It's a good spot to grow herbs as well. A lot of sun. Yeah. All right. Anyway, man, I'll talk to you later on, and we'll get more set up. Thanks again, Scott. All right, everybody. Hey, Scott just called back. Monica's question: where do the donations for Scott go towards? Monica, that's a great question. We can actually, and I'll put the emails up there. You guys can actually send it to Scott, these direct questions. When I was over there, what I saw was Scott put all of his money towards educational programs for children. And also, he was finding ways to monitor marine protected areas and to help reefs grow by using electricity. And I'm overly simplifying this, and I'm not saying it correctly, so I don't want to speak too much on it. But they were using electricity to help stimulate coral growth in the early parts of when the coral is growing. So he's been working heavily on trying to preserve the coral. And, when we were in the Philippines, I got to go to Apo Reef, which was supposed to be this beautiful dive spot, and the majority of the corals have been bleached. We found that a majority of the fishing areas had collapsed, and a majority of the reefs had retreated. And there's been a massive issue. So Scott has actually given up his usual life and just devoted it to trying to regrow these corals, trying replanting corals. He actually goes out and will go out and spend all day planting corals. So he's in the water. He's always looking for investors. He's always working with local communities. And that's one thing that's great about him is he's over there, but he's working with the local communities and he's getting them to agree on how to move forward together. And it's another thing that, until Scott was there, it wasn't really happening. So, he does have a fantastic, I think a fantastic organization over there. And so let's see. And Coralie says, yeah, you totally took that wrong. I mean, marjoram. Okay. Or mint or tarragon. And hey, Andrea, Te Poop, welcome to join the show today. I know you're getting here at the last moment, but I just wanted to say hi to everybody, say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And, in this time where everybody, now, at least for me, in my perspective, I'm going to take this thing off because it makes me tilt my head weird. Okay. So what I feel that we are really seeing here are people that have innovative approaches to getting back to nature. We know for a fact now that the people that are supposed to be in charge are supposed to take care of us or not. And we know this. And look at the EPA just left. We're going to talk about Andrew Wheeler again, too, the head of the EPA, because I think he's one of the biggest environmental criminals, and we need to talk more about him because you can get him removed. It doesn't matter who the president is or who the next president is. We can remove Andrew Wheeler, and it's maybe one of the most important things in America that we do, because the EPA has gone in and been dismantled by a coal lobbyist and now has closed its doors. So your USDA has walked away from you. Your EPA has walked away from you. The only thing we have left are to safeguard ourselves and our children and our future by finding natural ways to live and rethinking what we're doing. Even in the coronavirus, if you think about it here in Los Angeles, it's meant that we're all on top of each other. The idea of it looks weird when you're outside. Cities aren't designed for this. So there is a lot of things that we're doing that are not good for humans, and we're starting to pay the price for those things. And, I think Scott brought up a great point. Sustainability is not enough. We need to gain a little bit for the world. We need to push it forward a little bit, because if we just get back to net zero, it's not going to be enough. We need to find a way to move forward like that. So again, there's all these beautiful ways. Monica has brought up some great points. Everybody actually brought up great points today. I do think, as Scott brought up, if we could reduce animal agriculture, that would be a huge change that could really affect things. And even if not, we need to rethink this international food model. It is all going too crazy. We will cover animal agriculture on an upcoming podcast in its entirety. I'm sorry if you feel that today we didn't quite cover it enough. Excuse me. I know it's an important topic, and it is an important topic to health in the future. But when we're talking in the Philippines, we really are talking about villages of 100 people that have local fishings and don't have access to grocery stores. And if they do have access to grocery stores, and I will put some links down for you guys, we went into some of these stores. It's all plastic goods. So, it's kind of like, which sustainability are we asking them to perform? Are we asking them to go consume a bunch of plastic noodles, or are we asking them to work with the environment? So it's challenging. There's no easy answer. There's definitely no easy answer. But one thing we do know for sure, we have to find a way to, as I always say, not look at the environment through our political parties, but judge our political parties and our politicians through the lens of the environment, because it's the one thing we all share. It's the one thing we all have. It's the one thing we all started with. And it has to be the one thing that we all have in the end here. And right now, we've lost that. So it's really important that we remember to do this. And remember, when we take this time that are doing sustainability fishing, it's not so easy as to just say you can't eat meat and that'll solve everything. We have to find more comprehensive ways to change things. The one thing that is the overriding factor is usually poverty. And again, we're getting into this situation where people like me can't go to the grocery store and buy everything I want right now. That doesn't bother me because I've lived over on these islands and I've seen this before, and it's not foreign to me. But to a lot of us, it's foreign to not have what we want at our moments. You get the things you need. It's just how things work here. It's not set up for that disruption. As Scott said, a lot of these people, what they're experiencing right now is what they were experiencing 4 months ago, which is, am I going to eat tonight? And that's a very different approach. And, we also have to remember there's a lot of people right now on the streets that are asking that same question. And although local food pantries and stuff are trying to help, it's still complicated. So if your food choices are always made in a store, then I just want to say, just consider yourself lucky and keep making good choices. And we have to find a better way to help all the other people that don't have that option. Because as I was just talking to my friend the other day, for a long time we used to have shared cultural experiences and they disappeared with the internet. We watched Seinfeld, or we all watched What Happened on America. Everybody watched the Grand Prix, or everybody had a shared cultural experience. Then with the internet, it became countrywide, and then our shared experiences diminished further and further until we got into Brave New World, where everybody is inside their independent pleasure pod, isolated. I mean, crazy enough, but that's where we are. This virus, if we can take something good out of it, it's that we have a shared cultural experience. Remember that everybody in the world is our brother and sister. And, it doesn't matter where you live, and it doesn't matter who they are. This is the perfect time to remember that we are all one. We need to come together. It's the only way we're going to change things. The people in charge are going to keep us separated, and they're going to keep us hungry, and they're going to keep us frightened. Only we can help each other, and we are the majority. And we are all like an encyclopedia set. All of us have different bit of knowledge we can help offer. So that's why I love conservation conversation, because we get to talk to people like Scott, who have very innovative ways of thinking and very innovative approaches. We get to talk to everybody else that also has good. Monica says, are any of these peeps affected by coronavirus? Let's see. That's a good question. At the moment, no. I don't think so. I think everybody is hopefully good. I know, for example, like Scott, if he were to get sick, just as an example, he's too modest to say this, but if he were to get sick, for one, he could get arrested if he leaves his island. But for two, the hospitals in Manila, and he sent me some paperwork from it. Most of them don't even have room. They're only doing outpatient treatments for coronavirus. So, the virus has taken everybody by surprise, but it's nice right now and this is what's important with our community here. We're an online community. We are together. You're not isolated. If anybody feels isolated, please send me a message. Send me a message on Facebook. Call me. You can Skype me. I don't want everybody to be at home and to feel isolated and to let that affect how they're living their life. Scott is on a remote island in the Philippines, and due to the internet, we can all be together. So we are in the best, most equipped time ever to deal with this quarantine, and it's not going to destroy the fabric of our lives, but it will give us a nice perspective to remember that food insecurity is a big problem here in America and around the world. And the first thing that we need to solve is food insecurity. And now we're all experiencing it at different areas and directions. So I just wanted to say it was great to see everybody today. Thank you for being here. Pretty long show. But you know what? I think we should do a show. We should do a couple of shows this week. So if everybody's cool with that, why don't we get back together Wednesday? We'll get back together at a different time, though. Maybe a time a little bit easier for everybody. We'll get back together Wednesday. Let's talk more about the environment. Let's talk about the EPA abandoning us. Let's talk about the changes that we can affect locally. And that's one thing, is if we all make a change locally, then we can all make a change universally. That's the exciting part of it. Anyway, I am so excited. Thank you, Monica, for being on today. It's great to see you here. Thank you, Ina, for being on today, and Andrea, and my mom, Sally, Coralie, Camilla, and so many of the people that I always enjoy having these wonderful conversations with. And again, self-sustainability is possible. It's not easy, and it requires a very different form of commitment to living day to day. Those of us in cities, we live month to month. We think month to month. We think year to year. Oh, in 4 months I can get my thing, and I'll do this next year. And then in 4 years I can do this thing. In 5 years, Scott reminding us that most people that are out there right now that are in quarantine, don't have access to grocery stores, and don't have that. So just, it's an important thing. And thank you, Scott, for bringing that perspective back to all of us. So Courtney says, let's do it. Yes. So fantastic. All right. Well, it's on. So everybody, thank you for joining today. I'm going to go put some links in the comments. I mean, not in the comments. I'm going to go put some links right now in the description. And I'm going to put the next ad up. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was an incredible conversation with Scott Countryman, who not only is trying to change things over and trying to save the reefs in the Philippines, but he's a man who is walking the walk, talking the talk, living fully sustainable, leaving almost zero carbon footprint in the world, and actually getting ahead of himself and maybe absorbing some of our other carbon footprints. So thank you, Scott Countryman, for being with us today and talking to us about so many things. I didn't know about solar boats. So if you guys know about solar boats, put some links in there. It's always important that we can learn more about better ways to see the future. So as always, we always say, it's our world. Let's talk about it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I can't wait. I will see you all Wednesday. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. And, you know what? I just forgot the last thing I was going to tell you. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. I appreciate everybody being so interactive and being here on the show today. Great to see you.